You are watching Wide Field with Vivian Birchall. This is Wide Field.
Welcome to Wide Field. I'm Vivian Birchall, your host. Today's topic is hacking COVID-19 solutions for Africa. And my guests from MIT are Stuart Krusell, who is the Senior Director of Global Programs at MIT Sloan School of Management, Ari Jacobovits, who is the Managing Director for Africa, MIT International Science and Technology Initiatives, Freddy Nguyen, and if I said that wrong, he'll correct me later. He's a postdoctoral fellow at MIT, and Beniamin Boutboul, MBA candidate, class of 2020. And lastly, we have Merey Ndambuki, also MBA candidate 2020. Welcome to Wide Field. And to our viewers, this is a conversation with a team from MIT about their recently concluded hackathon challenge titled Africa Takes on COVID-19. Before we start, could you each please tell us what you do at MIT and your role in the MIT COVID-19 challenge? We'll start with Stuart.
Yeah, good afternoon, Vivian. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Stuart Krusell, as she said, I am a Senior Director with MIT Sloan Global Programs, also a Senior Lecturer in the Global Economic Management Department. Was one of the 3 people who originally conceived of this idea in terms of doing something related to COVID in Africa, but very quickly plugged into the network, a lot of the leaders that you see here with me today.
Thank you, Stu. Ari?
Thank you, Vivian. Thanks for having us. It's nice to be on your show. So I work at, I run the Africa program at MISTI, MIT International Science and Technology Initiatives. At MISTI, we basically set up opportunities for students to get involved with different internships, research projects, and teaching opportunities across Africa, and just support Africa-related programming on campus in a variety of ways. And on the COVID response, so on the COVID challenge, I worked primarily on partnerships and outreach initiatives, and supported some other teams broadly because of my contacts and connections throughout the region.
Good to have you here, Ari. And Freddy?
Thanks, Vivian, for having us. My name is Freddy Nguyen. I am a postdoctoral fellow at MIT in the Institute for Medical Engineering and Sciences. I'm also a resident physician at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. I'm one of the co-founders or co-directors for the MIT COVID-19 Challenge, of which Africa Takes on COVID-19 has been one of a series of virtual events and hackathons that we've done over the last couple of months now.
Good to have you here. And Beniamin?
Yeah, hi Vivian. Yes, I'm Beniamin. I'm a second-year MBA at MIT, soon to be graduate in a few weeks now. I have a background in, thank you, background in energy access, worked in Uganda, Ivory Coast, Nigeria before coming to school. This year I was organizing a large Africa-focused conference at MIT that was unfortunately canceled because of the pandemic. And so when the opportunity presented itself to organize a large virtual hackathon dedicated to Africa, I immediately jumped on the opportunity, and I'm really happy to have made it happen with the entire team.
Welcome. And Merey?
Hi, Vivian. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Ndambuki. I'm an MBA candidate at MIT Sloan, graduating in a few weeks, similar to Beniamin. I'm originally from Kenya, so was super excited to get involved in this hackathon. In terms of experiences, my background is in product strategy, market research, and I've done some management consulting. And I'm happy to be here. So in terms of the hackathon, I helped with the mentor team. So recruiting our mentors to support our teams during this hackathon, but also post-hackathon, and also leading Track J, which was really focused on combating misinformation around COVID-19. So excited to be here.
I'm excited to have you all, and let's dig right in. The first question is, what inspired the creation of Africa Takes on COVID-19 Hackathon?
Well, Vivian, it all started as so many things do nowadays with the Zoom call. So David Capitalupo, who's the assistant dean for global programs, my boss, and a colleague that we've done a lot of work with, an award-winning filmmaker from Arizona, Bill Carter, and I were talking about Africa and COVID, and what could we do to marshal some of the resources of MIT to assist as they were starting to look and deal with this pandemic. So we kicked that around a little bit, and in a very MIT way thought, what's the best thing is a hackathon, because you're able to bring a lot of people together in a very short period of time. And like a hackathon, one of the great things about the school is there's so many things going on that you don't necessarily know. So energy bounces off energy. We reached out to Beniamin because we had been a sponsor of the conference, and we thought, here's a group of people who are interested in Africa, and see if they wanted to take this on, and readily agreed. And in less than 2 weeks, partly because Beniamin knew Freddy because he had participated in a previous hackathon, something I was not aware of. Again, that energy that happens. Ari, who is been doing a lot of work in Africa and was able to bring partners. It was just one of those things that, from a institute point of view, was wonderful. But then just quickly grew in the 2 weeks to 1,500 participants from 106 countries, 44 of which were in Africa. Half of the participants were in Africa. So this went from a 3-person Zoom call to truly a global virtual event.
That was quite an exciting event. I was one of the participants, but I won't get into that right now. The other question I have is, why did you choose a hackathon instead of some other method?
Well, the original thought, again, was it's rather than trying to just coordinate across the institute, it was 2 things. One, the ability to bring brain power from literally around the world. But the other really important thing, and I think it bore out over the course of the event, was we wanted on-the-ground participation from the continent. If you're going to be talking about solutions for Africa, you have to have Africans in the conversation helping you define what the problems are and what the solutions are. I said at the intro of the event on the Friday that we weren't here to offer the answers. We were here to help to divine some of the solutions. And so that was one of the reasons. It was the easiest, fastest way to connect into the continent.
And how long did it take to organize, and how did you select the mentors? Yeah, so as Stu mentioned, it took a little less than 2 weeks to put the hackathon together, and it was all hands on deck since the beginning. In terms of selection process for our mentors, our criteria was very simple. So we wanted to maintain a healthy balance between mentors with regional expertise in as many African countries as possible, but also have mentors with subject expertise that span from medicine, software engineering, design, business, or whatever you can think of in terms of functions. And because of that, we were able to pull together over 200 mentors with amazing profiles that actually supported our teams during the hackathon and are continuing to support those teams as they think about execution and implementation. So it was amazing to see the support that we got. You've mentioned it took you less than 2 weeks. How did you pull that off? That was a big event. I was at it. Yes, it was a big event, and I think Stu kind of talked to this a little bit. So it took reaching out to people who've done this before. So when you think about Beat the Pandemic, the second series of the MIT COVID-19 challenge that happened, that is a group and team that had actually done or rolled out a hackathon before. So it was taking those best practices and implementing them for a new hackathon that's focused on the African continent. I think the second piece is also pulling together people who are super committed, super hardworking, super passionate about this. And I think that's where Stu and Beniamin came in, pulling resources that are not only working on recruiting participants, mentors, but also thinking about logistics, operations, and having those meetings to make sure that everything is ironed out. So from an organization perspective, I think that was really important as well. So.
I think it speaks to a much bigger thing that's happening across MIT right now too, and that is really doubling down on our engagement with Africa. I mean, this is something that we've been really prioritizing at the institute level for the last years. We have an associate provost of international activities who's designated Africa as sort of a geographic priority in terms of engagement.
Yeah.
And it's something that, it's something I work on every day, and a lot of other people I work with are very passionate about. And so time comes to actually pull something off in 2 weeks, I have the sort of the nodes and the people I can talk to who've been supporters of this initiative, for the last few years, who are ready to run with it. So I think, it just speaks to a much bigger emphasis MIT is playing on the importance of a collaboration with Africa and a belief in amazing research, education, and innovation that can come out of that collaboration.
Yeah, I will get into, the collaboration with African countries much later. But before we get to that, why did you focus on COVID-19, which is only one of the main issues facing Africa? I know that Stu has talked, highlighted it, saying that it's because of COVID-19 and Zoom that this came about. But why just COVID-19? Why wasn't there a hackathon for Africa for other diseases, for example?
Yeah, so I can take that one. So there's so many challenges and opportunities we could focus on when we're talking about like the African continent and what problems we want to tackle. But I think COVID-19 was a critical focus and an issue to focus on for two reasons. So first, COVID-19 is a disease that has no cure and has affected almost everyone globally, directly or indirectly. So for us to be in a position to solve the other challenges that face African populations, we need to ensure these populations' health and safety, first and foremost. And second, COVID-19 has significantly affected the economic and social stability of most individuals on the continent in ways that we couldn't imagine a few months ago. So the reality is solving COVID-19 is solving those social and economic problems, or bringing them to the forefront of the conversation, right? So when you think about the experience, at least in a place in Kenya where for most people, social distancing is a privilege, and we need to learn how to protect essential workers so that they can not only feed the population, but they can also feed themselves. So that's something that brings to the forefront of how do we ensure the economic stability of these people pre and post COVID-19. So it's bringing to the forefront issues of inequality that need to be addressed and that need to be spoken about in a way that didn't come through before. So yeah, that's how I see it.
Thanks, Merey. If I can add as well. So our hackathon had 10 distinctive tracks put into two separate focus areas. One was strengthening the health system and the other one was flattening the curve. Strengthening the health system really had a more healthcare, direct COVID-19 focus. Flattening the curve, on the other hand, was really more how can you adapt day-to-day life in time of COVID-19. And so it had a lot more solutions that looked not just beyond the current crisis, but what would come after. And so we tried as well to have a balance between both, because obviously this crisis is hitting countries around the continent and around the world now, but we also want to design solutions for after.
Thank you for all the work that you guys put into determining those tracks, identifying what tracks to focus on. I was a part of track D because it touched deeply. When I look at Africa and some of the challenges that the communities face, especially in this COVID-19 era, one of the reasons I joined the hackathon was because my childhood was in a slum. So I felt the pain of those people, what could potentially happen to them. And so it was amazing to see what some of the solutions that people came up with. And I don't want to dig, it's not my story today, but how many groups participated and how many ideas were generated. I know that you have briefly talked about, the number of countries that were represented, but how many ideas were generated?
Yes, we had 174 teams that presented on the Sunday for the final presentation. So an equal number of ideas. And what we've been doing in the past few days since the hackathon ended is really to go through all these presentations, all these solutions, and try to figure out how we can best help the teams going forward. Because one of the main goals of this hackathon was to not just help teams design solutions over the weekends, but really focus on what comes after and on implementation. And so that's been a lot of our work in the past few days. But yeah, a lot of solutions that came out.
Do you have, just a wild number you can throw there that there were maybe 100 ideas generated, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 174 different ideas because each team basically tackled their challenge or their track in their own way. And so there were some that had very different solutions even within the same track. And so I would say, there were 174 different ideas that came out.
So what was the criteria for selecting the winning teams?
We had a panel of judges. We had between 4 and 5 judges per track, and each team were, the different criteria were impact,
I have an impact, innovation, implementation, presentation.
Wait, start this again. I didn't have it. I don't know why I took this.
That's okay. All right, Ari to the rescue.
Yeah.
So have authorities, given that there were these excellent ideas that came out of this process, have authorities in Africa expressed interest in the hackathon outputs?
Yeah, it's actually really impressive, and as Benjamin said, we're trying to catch up. It's only a week and a half later, but trying to see what's been going on. Maybe to give you one example, there was one of the teams, Decentralized Essentials. Interestingly enough, they were not a winning team, but in the time since, one of the judges from that track reached out to them to want to follow up. Anita Kamini, who's with the World Bank. She used to be with One.org, which was one of our sponsors, one of our partners for the event. Some ministers in Ghana have reached out to them, and the government of Sierra Leone, because of course the Minister of Education was one of our keynote speakers, and so the Office of the President is working with them on getting GPS coordinates for markets around Freetown. So that's just one example of what's going on, but we're trying to keep track of the others, because as noted, and Freddy can talk to, what's really important about this event is not the weekend, it's what happens after.
That's exciting to know that there is some interest in some of the outputs from this process, because I think maybe I could ask, is there a strategy for reaching out to different African governments just to let them know that there are ideas out here that could be helpful?
I think part of it is not just governments, they're certainly involved, but one of the things that we were striving to do with the weekend, and one of the things that we've learned at Global Programs, and I think Ari would also say across MIT is it's really about multi-stakeholder engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's the students, it's the universities, it's the entrepreneurs, it's the innovators, it's the investors. I mean, you can just keep going down the list, because no one sector is going to be who solves this. And in fact, that's part of the idea of the hackathon, is to sort of throw people together. One of the winning teams in my track was headed up by a guy from China, but he had a team that was comprised of Africans and a European. So I think it really is an idea of, and this is one of the things we're working. We have more than 70 partners who were part of this, 15 from MIT. And so we're reaching out to them too, to let them know about the teams and what the solutions they came up with were. And again, sort of like with this example, there's a team that might not be a winner, but is somebody interested in investing or following up on.
So we've had a whole, from the beginning, we've had a team focused on post-hack. That, you know, what do we do now that we created this huge, diverse virtual ecosystem with all these different players all over the world, and how do we continue leveraging that so that these ideas can actually get implemented? So I've been involved recently with the post-hack team. They've put together an amazing resource guide for every participant that includes information from all our different partners, information about all our different mentors, other funding information, other mentorship information, really sort of carrying over the richness of the ecosystem that we created to continue helping them with the implementation process. And as we go forward, we're thinking about ways that we can actually continually have mentorship opportunities available to these different teams by leveraging the mentor network that we've created, and other resources inside and outside of the hackathon as well. So I think, you know, again, like the post-hack is almost one of the most important aspects of this whole thing, because what's the whole point if you're just going to come up with this idea, you know, to a bunch of strangers online and then not do anything about it? So that's, you know, that's something that we're very focused on, and looking for different ways to actually leverage these things into existence.
And so how many of these the winning ideas are being implemented right now?
Well, I mean, to some extent, I would say all of them. We're trying to, we have 30 winning ideas.
Yeah.
And, you know, we sent out some surveys a few days ago about who is continuing, and, you know, as you're continuing, what support do you need? How can we support you? How can we continue the conversation? So, I mean, naturally, I don't think you're going to get all 174 teams to continue on, but the idea is to work with those and provide resources to make it as feasible and as possible for the remaining teams to actually carry forward. Freddie, maybe you have some further comments on the implementation aspect and how you see that, how you saw that happening from your previous challenge.
Yeah, so in general, and just to give you some perspective from the pandemic event that was about a month prior to the Africa event, you know, we had similarly around 200 teams form. At this point, about a month later, we still have about 54 teams that have continued. So roughly about 25% of the teams have continued. And that's actually a much higher percentage than we've had with our live hackathons that we've done in the past. And I think that really a lot of it has been around a few reasons as to why that rate has been higher. One is the really intention of putting the support behind post-hackathon in terms of, again, keeping up the momentum that was built during the weekend itself, bringing in relevant partners at the right time for each of those teams. So I think on the post-hack team now, we have people who are focused on figuring out what the needs are from the teams, but we also have people who are working with our partners to figure out what resources they can provide, when are they best useful for what part of the project development, so to speak, and idea development for those teams. And it's about finding that perfect fit between the two sides. And I think, you know, to a point that was made earlier, you know, we're here to support all of the teams that are continuing. In our past experience, winning at the hackathon has little to no correlation to the success of the team afterwards, because it's not just about the solution, the idea, it's also about the people who are on that team who can execute and deliver on that project as well as the environment that we provide for them to continue, whether it's the partners, whether it's the resources, funding opportunities, and so on.
So just to piggyback on what you just said, I know you briefly highlighted some of the follow-ups that you're doing, but what kind of follow-up are you planning for all the winning teams to make sure that everything is being implemented, at least what the solutions are being implemented, that they're getting the right connections, and also feedback, because there's got to be some monitoring and evaluation at some point to, of these projects. What are you planning? What's the follow-up like?
I can add to that. So the first thing that I want to call out is for every winning team, there was actually a prize involved, a monetary prize involved. So everybody was getting $500, at least to give them some runway or some funding to actually implement and test their idea in whatever country or context they want to roll it out in. The second thing is in terms of feedback, the same survey that was sent out about post-hack, there was a survey that was also sent out about mentorship and what type of mentor or expertise you need on your team. And the reason why that is important is because once you know what the team needs, you can actually match them with mentors that can fill in those gaps and actually answer those questions that they have. And this is something that's open to them. So we interviewed, or we surveyed the mentors as well to understand what if they were interested in continuing after the hackathon, and most of them signed up to actually help the teams. So these are relationships that are actually going to extend past these few weeks and grow as those ideas have been implemented and rolled out. So those are the two things I wanted to note. Others might chime in here if they want to.
Yeah, and to add to that, really the work that we're doing now in post-hack is really a matching process between what the teams need and what resources we have access to as organizers, and as having the relationship with the partners and the mentors that we brought on board for this event. So it's really key for the teams to let us know as clearly as possible. Obviously it's constantly changing, but at this stage, what types of contacts and resources they need, and so that we can help them achieve that. It's also part of the reason why we are trying to get the word out, not just about the event now, because obviously the event has happened, but really about the solutions that came out from the weekend, and help the teams get a post-hack boost, and get some interest from some outside parties that maybe weren't involved in the hackathon in the first place, but are interested in some of the solutions that came out of it.
Yeah,
and hopefully, Vivian, that's some of your viewers.
I'll work on it. I'll work on that. Ari, say something.
I was just going to add that there was Freddy and Beniamin led sort of an evaluation after the hackathon of our own organization and what we've been doing and how we could do it better. So it's something that we're always, we're thinking about as it is, what went well, what didn't go well, how can we improve upon it? These are the questions that we're asking ourselves after the hackathon happened, so that we can address them going forward. I know there are some additional hackathons planned in different regions and around different topics. So those learnings can be then implemented for the future. So not only are, we're looking at ourselves too, not just out at the different solutions.
Right.
What Ari's referring to is what I always like to call the hacking on our hacking methodology, so to speak. So continuing to always be improving and being agile with the process.
All right. Stu, you were saying some people can, our viewers can take part in this whole process. How would they get involved?
Well, we can give you some of our email addresses. They can go to the website, which we will provide you, and write us. We will be posting up what the team's solutions were from what was presented. Again, I think it's important to note something that Freddy said, which is, it's not just the winning teams. Some of them will go by the wayside, others will rise. And that's really what the post-hack is to be working with people to see who's got the commitment and the backing, that multi-stakeholder backing, to be able to continue. So if people want to reach out to us, we can excuse me, show them what was done, and they can let us know, and we can do the matching.
Excellent. You know, we talk about solutions for African countries. Prior to moving to the US, I worked for not the US government, for the Ugandan government. And one of the projects I worked with was the APRM and NEPAD programs. And getting buy-in for something as simple as e-school program within African countries was extremely difficult. So what is the strategy for getting some of these countries where the solutions are supposed to work to get a buy-in? Because they won't work if no government is buying in. At the end of the day, we might have private sector, we might have other players, universities, but if it's a health-related solution, usually most of these countries, the health care is centralized. Well, there's also private sector, but private sector is very expensive. So if you want it to be accessible to the people, it's going to need to have government intervention. So this just came up while you were speaking. What is the strategy for getting some buy-in from authorities?
I mean, I think for that, we really have to leverage the knowledge of the teams, right? I think a lot of these teams are responding to specific issues they saw in the countries where they live, or the countries that they know if they're not currently living there. So I think we want to support their leadership in actually going out and solving these problems, because I think there's a belief that they would know better than us sitting in our office or sitting in our homes, actually, where we are. So I wanted to sort of touch on that, and is supporting the goals of the African-based organizations in the ways that we can. The second thing I want to say is just general right now. I think that's definitely a problem. You have to get buy-in from the public sector. I think something that we have experienced, and I think the fact that we're able to launch this whole thing in 2 weeks also speaks to that, is just this willingness. There's this incredible willingness right now to solve these problems, because these are global problems. They're affecting everybody's life in some ways that are very similar, in some ways that are very different and unique. So I think that this is actually a really opportune time for collaboration and problem solving because of that willingness.
And just to chime in, Vivian, I think COVID-19 has kind of created a peculiar situation where even African governments are kind of uncertain on how to respond to this. So when you think about, I guess, their willingness to accept ideas or solutions that kind of communicate, we're here to help rather than replace what you're doing, and we're solely here to support, I believe that they'd be more willing to be open to that and to accept those solutions, rather than people who are coming in saying that you're doing this wrong, we need to do it this way, or this is how it should be done. So I think the disease has kind of changed the dynamics in terms of like what people know and what people are willing to accept in terms of collaboration. I will say that given that governments move a little bit slowly, there's a question on implementation. So despite them being like, yes, we want your help, how does that implementation timeline look like for people who are moving forward? So that's the biggest question, and that's the biggest hurdle. And as Ari said, it's really dependent on the connections and the resources that we have on the continent and the teams that have those connections to actually work through that and figure out what's the best way to move forward, given those hurdles.
Yeah, and the biggest challenge I've heard most recently is the funding. Oh, we need money to deal with the COVID-19 in Africa. That's what many leaders are asking for. They're asking for debt relief. They're asking for, so depends on what the cost implication is for these solutions, because if they cannot even deal with the basic healthcare currently on the continent and the different countries, how are they going to? I guess that comes down to the collaboration that you guys are talking about. But either way, this is a fantastic program. I was a part of it. I am extremely thrilled by the experience. It was the best weekend I had had in so many months. And one other question. Who is funding the implementation of some of these winning solutions? I know you've briefly glazed on it, talked about collaborations, but are there some specific funders that are out there ready and willing to support some of these winning teams?
In terms of the prize money that they got, which is just sort of a small token, that came all from, I believe, from MIT internally, just various groups within MIT, primarily Sloan, if I'm not mistaken. There are other things in our post-hack guide. There are other funding opportunities available that we've gone out and done research and have sort of highlighted and presented to the different teams. I don't know the full scope of those details, but there is a spreadsheet with like all these different funding opportunities listed. Maybe somebody else can chime in on that too, or Freddie, you saw something related to funding these things.
Yeah, if I can add, in terms of the funding, the real next step for a team that comes out of a hackathon is to really focus a lot more on their solution and talk to some potential implementation partners and people that could actually use their solution or give them some feedback just after that 48-hour sprint. And so that's really what the teams are focusing on for now. And then what we think is that there will be funding opportunities that come out of that. And so our role is really that, as we were saying, that matching process between the teams and the partners and the implementation partners who then have either some funding opportunities themselves or know or can guide the teams where to get these funding opopportunities.
Yeah,
some of these companies or some of these ideas that are emerging are slowly evolving into really true startups that are actually going to be seeking venture funding. And I think it's pretty well documented that venture funding and private equity funding in Africa, over the last 10 years has totally exploded. I think they had a record year in 2019. So, some of the traditional funding sources are still open for this.
Stu, you were saying, you were adding something?
I was just, I think, Ari, that's an excellent point. And part of our motivation in doing this is trying to help develop the entrepreneurial, innovative ecosystems, because that's part of not relying on just one sector. But there's some outside groups like the Clinton Foundation does have money that some of the teams can be applying for. One.org is involved in there. Standard Bank actually has approached us about they want to be doing some hackathons on the ground in Africa. So I don't know that necessarily translates into money, but if they're following up on the idea, I would think that somewhere in the back of their mind they must be thinking that there's some investment opportunities, and they recognize the importance of generating these type of ideas at the ground level and helping them to grow.
Right.
If I can add briefly on this point, so beyond the weekend and the solutions and the teams and everything that came out of this weekend, which was amazing, I think we've covered that. Yeah. Beyond that, what was also amazing was the inbound requests that we got from other organizations that wanted to themselves create virtual hackathons. And so we have a number of calls scheduled this week and in the coming weeks to help these organizations with kind of our best practices. And like we've done it once, but Freddy and the team has done it 2 or 3 times. So we're starting to have some idea on how to run these large virtual hackathons. And I think this kind of secondary impact in a way is super rewarding and super, it's just great to see that happen as well.
Yeah, it was a great experience, and I would wish it for anyone who is interested in having sleepless nights and come up.
What was your favorite part, Vivian, as a participant?
Okay, it wasn't my favorite, but it was the most memorable moment. For the first time in my life, I burnt an omelette because I was busy brainstorming who burns an omelette. And my teammates they couldn't keep it together. They just laughed. I remembered
how hard eggs are to get. You don't want to be doing that right now.
Nobody burns an omelet. So anyway, that was a memorable moment. And we used to wake up at 3 a.m. just to try and meet at the same, because we were in different time zones. So that was another crazy experience. So it was all memorable. So if you want people to learn, now I'm mumble jumbled. How can people who want to learn more about outcomes of the hackathon contact this team?
Well, we can send you and Mark the web address and then our emails, which anybody who wants to reach out can just let us know.
I have the COVID-19 Africa at MIT.edu.
Yep. And then maybe I'll be so bold as to, I'll volunteer, but I'd suggest like maybe Benjamin, actually any one of us, if somebody wants to write and just say they're interested. So.
Yeah, so I'd say a few ways. Like one, definitely our main email address that you can find on our website, and that's COVID-19 challenge at MIT.edu. And then one thing that we're doing as well now in the post-hack world is to write a few blog posts about the solutions that came out, to really again get the word out about these amazing solutions that came out. And again, hopefully that'll reach some people that are interested in implementation and in actually working on these solutions. And so we've just released one a few days ago, and we're working on a few more as well.
Here's a quick idea before I forget. Have you tried reaching out to the State Department? They are always looking for programs to work with Africa on. Just pitch an idea to them and let them fund it. Nothing to lose.
Even now?
Oh, no. We'll see. You never know. Anyway, thank you. One last thing. Benjamin, you mentioned working in Uganda. Of course, I had to ask this because I'm from Uganda. What was the experience like?
It was amazing. It was my first time actually living and working in Africa on the continent. I was working for an off-grid solar company in Kampala called Phoenix, and it was one of my greatest personal and professional experiences. Got to spend some time in the western part of the country as well, visiting some customers and getting to know the company. Basically, I was there for about a month, and then moved over to West Africa, to Ivory Coast, to help open the branch of that company over in Uganda. But absolutely loved Kampala, and I want to go.
I hope you can all visit Uganda someday. I can be a tour guide. Let's have a project.
I was there last year. I was there over the summer.
Well, for the others who haven't been to Uganda.
I haven't been yet, and I'm from...
Imagine, that's a shame. I've been to Kenya many times. Yeah. But anyway, let's put it on the checklist of things to do. Visit to Uganda. I'll be a tour guide. And with that, I want to thank you all for taking your time off your busy schedules to be my guest on Whitefield. Thank you for your contributions to Africa. And before I sign out, I want to give a shout out to my team members, Team Ayo, that's Joao, Tai, Pascal, Hedby, Timothy, Akola. You are amazing during the COVID-19 challenge, and it was an amazing time. Thank you for being my guest.
Thank you.
All right, to our viewers, thank you for watching Whitefield. Till next time.